On every Yom Tov, we recite the bracha of Shechianu, blessing God who has given us life, sustained us, and guided us to reach this specific season.
So before the Shechianu, the Rav Melamed here, we're learning about the laws of the Seder night. We're talking about Kiddush. Started off, we read through the Seder, we memorized it. At least one student memorized all 15. Yeah. And then we talked a little bit about the Seder plate, and now we're talking about the Kiddush. The Kiddush, this year in particularly, it's Friday night. So we have a Kiddush of Shabbat, and the special Kiddush for the Leila Seder, the night of the 15th of Nisan, and in any case, the Kiddush always mentions the Exodus from Egypt, because that's really when the sanctity of the Jewish people started as a nation, and when we got the mitzvot, including the mitzvah of Shabbat. So we always mention many times throughout the year, every 7 days at least, we mention throughout the year that God took us out of Egypt in the Kiddush. This night, this mention of the Exodus, of course, is even doubly significant. And now we're talking about the difference being of this Kiddush from every other Kiddush. Everybody has to have their own cup of wine and drink it. Even if someone recites the Kiddush on behalf of everybody has to drink their own cup of wine and lean, etc. Now, why Rav Melamed explains that the idea of having Kiddush over wine teaches us that being holy doesn't mean only separate from the world, the least material you are. So, as a matter of fact, this week's Parsha teaches this lesson succinctly. The Parsha Tzav starts off with the first mitzvah of the Kohanim. They're supposed to be so holy, this Kohanim. What do? They eat. They eat. The korban, it's part of the sacrifice that the Kohanim have to eat. So the eating of the Kohanim is like the pinnacle of using the physical world in service of God. It's a worship. And at the beginning of the Parsha, the first mitzvah is not even eating when the Kohanim are eating. What's the first mitzvah the Kohanim have to do? And you understand, it's a mitzvah for every part of the process. They say a bracha, just like we say a bracha when we put on tefillin. They said a bracha before they did the service in the temple. And what was the first service of the morning? First in the morning, huh?
Water to go in the
Before the water. I mean, I guess the Kohen had to wash his hands before he went into this temple service. But the actual service itself, the first service of the day, after the washing, first what? No, before the slaughtering. Good. What cleaning?
the altar. Ash.
That's right, taking out the ashes off the altar. Essentially, taking out the garbage. You start off the day, you gotta clear off the altar from all last night's ashes. So we see that even such a mundane activity like taking out the garbage becomes part of the service of God, and so much more so when we use a cup. That's why we use a cup of wine. Rav Melamed explains here that the sanctity can infuse and find expression even through physical food. Okay. And the sanctity of Israel can be revealed in its totality, specifically through the fullness of life, which combines the truth of Torah and faith with happiness and joy. Joy, of course, the wine represents something that brings people joy. Hope you had a lot of joy over Purim. Maybe not too much wine, but anyways, this is the first mitzvah of the night, Kadesh, over wine. Now, after saying the regular brachot, Borei Pri Hagafen, and Mekadesh, Yisrael Vazmanim, to this time it's going to be Mekadesh HaShabbat, Yisrael Vazmanim. We finish off the Kiddush mentioning both the Shabbat and the Yom Tov and the special time of Zmanim. Zmanim, right, is the special times, the festivals. On Yom Tov we also recite a Shechianu. Okay, Yossi, go ahead. On every Yom Tov, we're in the middle of page 215.
On every Yom Tov we recite the bracha of Shechianu, blessing God who has given us life, sustained us, and guided us to reach the season. Because Yom Tov is a mitzvah that is celebrated anew during a specific season, the sages inserted a Shechianu at the end of Kiddush. After declaring the day's sanctity, it is only fitting to bless and thank God for having guided us to this sacred time. If one neglects to recite the Shechianu after Kiddush, he must recite it whenever he remembers, as long as Pesach has not ended.
Amazing. Did you know that you could recite Shechianu on the second day of Pesach, the third day of Pesach, whenever you remember? It's still new. Pesach only comes once a year. It's a new season, the Yom Tov. You have to recite Shechianu on the Yom Tov. Who doesn't say, Many people don't say the Shechianu on the Kiddush.
If the woman had like
Very good. That's right. Many women, when they light candles, they say Shechianu already when they're lighting the candles. It's not about the mitzvah of the candles, it's about the day. So if they say the Shechianu on the candles, they don't say it in the Kiddush. But if they're listening, they can answer Amen. But usually women are not saying their own Kiddush if they have a husband or a father. And usually he's going to be saying the Kiddush, so they can just answer Amen. But the Shechianu, they themselves are going to be saying over the candles. It doesn't matter when you say it. As I said, the standard is to insert it at the end of the Kiddush, which is the proclamation of the day of Yom Tov of Pesach.
Do you have to be doing some sort of regular act in order to say Shechianu?
No.
Or can you just say Shechianu like, oh, what to say? I'll say it right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's about the time. It's about the Yom Tov. And so the season is there. First time you remember, say it, whatever you happen to be doing. Okay, go ahead. This is the whole year round. I don't know if you've ever noticed it before a mitzvah. Some people mumble something before a bracha. You see something. People know what this is. The most common from Sfirat HaOmer, because there's a song. Before people count the Omer, sometimes people sing the song, which is a little preamble to the mitzvah. Even before you get to the Baruch Atah Hashem, people say something like, Hineni muchan zuman. Here I am ready and prepared to do this mitzvah. We say a little bit something about the mitzvah. Some people even add a Kabbalistic introduction. It starts with the words, Leshem Yichud Kud Shabrichu Ushinte. In order to unify the name of God with His divine presence. It's a Kabbalistic idea that whatever we do in this world is actually uniting not only us to the spiritual world, us to God, but also within the spiritual realm, we can affect a unification, which means a coming close of... some people say it right before Baruch Shamar, correct. It's in the Sidurim. Various different mitzvot. This is a custom, as I said, a double custom. One is just to prepare for the mitzvah, and the other one is a Kabbalistic idea of actually mentioning this idea of unification. And that's why you're going to find it in lots of the Haggadot. Before every cup, and before the mitzvah of matzah, and before mitzvah of maror, even before the bracha, you have a little intro preamble, and that's why he mentions it here. Many people, go ahead, Yossi.
Many people say a preliminary statement of intention, Hineni
Muchan, yeah.
or L'Shem Yechud, before each of the 4 cups of wine. One should not do so between the bracha and drinking, as this constitutes an interruption. Rather, the formula should be recited before Kiddush, and in the case of the other 3 cups, before the bracha on the wine. If the first day of Pesach coincides with Shabbat, we invoke Shabbat in the Kiddush. If it begins on Shabbat's night, 2 bracha are added on the creation.
Actually, Saturday night, he means like Motzei Shabbat, not Shabbos night, Saturday night. So, meaning Motzei Shabbat. If it's Motzei Shabbat, then 2 brachot are added, of course, part of the Havdalah, special form of the Havdalah.
And on the separation of different forms of sanctity, Amadil ben Kodesh Kodesh.
Right, that's not this year. That's I think it was last year actually, but I'm not sure. Yeah, very cool. So very cool. Different types of Kodesh.
Going from the Kodesh to Chol, which is ordinary, you go from holy to another holy.
That's right. What's the difference between the holiness of Shabbat and the holiness of Yom Tov? So very intriguing formulation here. Kodesh.
How does one
distinguish between types
Shabbos
of holiness?
before Pesach? If he's not supposed to have matzah before, but it's very problematic to have bread. So do you have to have bread? But it's like everyone's like you just have this like big tray. Everyone's eating bread over the tray. Do not get any crumbs anywhere else. Or
Precisely. You can't eat matzah the day before Pesach. Last year was like that. That's right. It's a very unique situation. It doesn't happen this year, so we're not going to talk about it at length. This year, it comes out to be Friday night, not Saturday night. So Friday night, no problem. It's a regular. I mean, Erev Pesach, It's not quite regular, but it's not unusual from any other year. You finish off the chametz in the morning, you burn it, and then you don't eat in the afternoon until the seder, or you don't eat a major meal. Okay, we're going to talk about that again, but the 4 cups. Let's talk about the 4 cups. Ariel, you read for us page 215 at the bottom, number 6.
The 4 cups. The sages instituted drinking 4 cups of wine on the Seder night in order to increase the joy of redemption and give expression to our freedom. On every Yom Tov, there is a mitzvah to rejoice by drinking wine. But for Pesach, the sages further integrated 4 cups of wine into the Seder, so that our joy finds expression in each of its phases. Kiddush is recited over the first cup, and thus everyone's cup is filled prior to Kiddush. The story of the Exodus and the first part of Hallel are recited over the second cup, which is therefore filled just before the telling of the story is begun. Birkat HaMazon is recited over the third cup. We refill our glasses prior to its recitation and drink the wine right after. Finally, we pour the 4th cup, recite the second part of the Hallel and the great Hallel over it, and then drink the cup. Thus, every recitation at the Seder is over wine. If one drinks 4 cups of wine, one after another, it is as if he drank only 1 cup.
Okay, stop here. So basically what he's saying is that you have to drink the 4 cups, but it's not a chagalag contest, one after the other, 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't fulfill the mitzvah. The mitzvah is that the wine accompanies the different major sections of the Haggadah. First cup, Kiddush, obvious, right? Second cup, associated with
Maggie.
the Magi. They're actually telling the story. Part of it is Hallel, but the Hallel, the later section of Hallel is later. So the 3rd cup is actually on the Hallel. The 2nd cup is primarily on the story, which includes a little bit of Hallel in it. So first cup, Kiddush. Second cup, the story, Magid. The 3rd cup, Birkat HaMazon. Before Birkat HaMazon, Kol Shel Bracha. Many times people use a cup of wine for the Birkat HaMazon. When you have 10 people, you should do that. That's the common custom. And the 4th cup is on the Hallel, true. So we have a cup associated with each a mitzvah associated with each cup. And you can't just drink 4 cups of wine. That's the idea, that the wine accompanies you throughout the meal. But the hardest one to drink is usually the 4th. This is not so far long after the 3rd. The first cup of Kiddush, okay, you're thirsty. Maybe your head will spin a little bit. And then the Magid, you pour the cup right away when you start to tell the story, but usually it takes an hour, 2 hours, depends how long it is till you finish telling the story. You're reading the major section of the Haggadah. And by that time, all right, another cup of wine, fine. And then you eat right away. You have the matzah and the maror and the meal. So that'll sort of absorb the alcohol in the second cup. You might get a little bit too much wine, but you're eating, so it's okay. But then you're full. You have the afikoman, you're even fuller. And then you birkat hamazon. And now you have a cup of wine. Well, if you're not used to drinking wine, this is already a lot of alcohol. And the 3rd cup can be challenging. But, okay, you just ate. But then you just recite the Hallel. Okay, maybe it'll take you 10 minutes, maybe to half an hour. How long will it take you to sing the Hallel? Maybe, usually about half an hour, maybe a little bit more. You stop, you sing, you welcome Eliyahu, there's all sorts of things. That 4th cup of wine, that's right after the 3rd cup of the wine almost. And that's a tough one. But then you many people have a hard time staying awake for the extra songs. After the end of the Hallel, there's Chad Gadya. You might have heard of it, about the goat. Echad Mi Yodea. The best part, all those kids songs at the end, people are, after 4 cups of wine, they're a little tipsy sometimes. So we'll talk about that. Can you replace the wine with grape juice? Can you, if you have trouble? We're going to discuss it. We're going to discuss it in great detail. So we're just setting up the structure right now, and we're going to see exactly the details. Okay.
If one drinks 4 cups of wine, one after the other, it is as if he drank only 1 cup. Even if one waited between cups, if he did not recite any of the Haggadah during these pauses, he has not fulfilled this obligation according to the several poskim. This is because one must drink while discussing the Exodus. According to Beit Yosef, however, if one pauses between cups, he fulfills his obligation Bedi'ava.
But you can imagine that somebody is going to war, going to battle, or goes, to answer a hospital thing, and he wants to do the mitzvot. So, he does the mitzvot. So, one cup right after the other. Maybe he doesn't have time to recite any of the Haggadah. Is that good enough? Does he fulfill the mitzvah 4 cups? It's a debate. Okay, go ahead. The sages explain.
The sages explain the 4 cups as alluding to several things. The 4 expressions of redemption used in the Torah's account of the Exodus, the 4 kingdoms that subjugated Israel after it became a nation, and from which the Almighty saved us. The 4 cups of calamity that God will serve to the wicked among the nations of the world, and the corresponding 4 cups of consolation that God will pour out to Israel. As a rule, the number 4 represents completeness, for everything in the world has 4 sides, corresponding to the 4 points of the compass. Since the Exodus brought about a complete upheaval in the world, the Torah uses 4 expressions of redemption in relation to it. Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, I will rescue you from beneath the burden of Israel.
So number 1, I will rescue, right?
Yep.
Hotzeiti.
Number 2, I will save you from
Hitzalti.
enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. And number 4, I will take you for myself as a people and be your God. Thus you will know that I am the Lord your God, who has taken you out from beneath the burden of Egypt.
Excellent. So this is it's known on the 4 languages of redemption. Hotzeiti, that's the first. Translated here as I will rescue you. You can see it's bolded. Hitzalti, I will save you. Ga'alti, redeem you. And Lakachti,
Take you.
I will take you to be my nation. Kachti etchem li la'am. These are the four words used in the Torah in the description of Shemot 6 when God's telling Moshe, take the Jewish people out of Egypt. The plan is these 4 stages, if you will, 4 aspects of redemption. And what do they each mean? So it says here, rescue, save, redeem, and take you. It's hard to, what's the difference between rescue and save? It's hard to define them, but we try because, God gives these fully fleshed. It's not just poetry. There's many different aspects of the redemption. We call it all redemption, Ga'alti, right? Geula is redemption, right? And it's all part of creating the nation of Israel. I'm going to take you for me as my nation. So these four languages are need to be interpreted. Let's see what Rav Melamed interprets them on top of page 217. Ariel, Israel's bondage
in Egypt has more than just the enslavement of those 600,000 Jews. It manifested the subjugation of the spirit to the material, because the possibility of expressing spirituality in the world depends on the people of Israel, who were enslaved by the most materialistic of kingdoms, Egypt. In order to free Israel so that they could receive the Torah and illuminate and rectify the world, it was necessary to break all barriers of oppression from each direction. The 4 expressions of the redemption correspond to these.
It's funny. We've been celebrating this. How many years now? From the Exodus of Egypt?
Like 3,000 some years?
Yeah. More than 3,000 years.
1,500.
About 3,500 years. And for most of it, we've been talking about these 4 languages of redemption. Can you imagine what a major upheaval to change that? Some people suggest we are living in an era unprecedented change in Jewish history. There's been no bigger event since the Exodus than the ones that we're living in. And I don't mean the Ukraine and Russian invasion of Ukraine. What's the major event that's happened after thousands of years of Jewish history? Maybe. Take a look. You know what it's based on? Actually, you keep reading, there's a 5th language. The next verse continues. We focus on the 4. That's really all we could focus on for thousands of years. But there's another phrase. Keep reading. He says to you in the next paragraph, In fact,
a 5th expression of redemption appears in the very next verse. I will bring you to the land that I swore to give Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I will give it to you as an inheritance. I am the Lord. Since this verse does not address the Exodus itself, the sages did not institute a corresponding fifth cup. Nonetheless, it is customary to pour a fifth cup known as Eliyahu's cup, Kos Shel Eliyahu, which alludes to the complete redemption that begins with the entry into the promised land.
So we're going to see there's actually a debate. Some people say today we should not only just pour the fifth cup of Eliyahu, but we should actually drink it. Whoa. Or at least when we pour it, speak about the redemption of the Jewish people coming back to the land, God bringing us into the land. As I said, for thousands of years, Jews were not brought into the land in any major way. So this is fascinating. Maybe we can have an updated, modern version of the Haggadah. Maybe we talked about maybe instead of 4 sons, we have 5. Maybe instead of 4 cups, we should have 5 cups. We'll see more. Anyways, let's go back to the details of the wine. Renan, will you read for us page 217, number 7?
The wine. The sages stated that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 cups properly, one must dilute the wine with water, because otherwise it will be too strong and cause intoxication. Through the alcohol in such wine gives them pleasures, the mitzvah is to drink the wine in the manner of free people. That it's like wealthy people who have control of their own time and permit themselves to drink the best wine, making sure it's diluted properly so that one can enjoy it without getting drunk. Today, wine it's not as strong and there is no need to dilute it. Even when it's necessary to dilute it, this is done at the winery. Therefore, there is no mitzvah today to dilute the wine. To some, those who do some do so to enhance the mitzvah.
Have you ever seen this? This is ancient history, diluting the wine. In the Mishnaic and Talmudic times, you couldn't drink the wine. It had to be diluted with water, and there's a whole culture around that. How much? One person likes it diluted a little bit more, like one likes it a little bit diluted less. How much do you dilute it? Is it still considered wine if you're adding so much water? Nowadays, nobody dilutes the wine. For some reason, we're not quite sure why. It could be that there's greater irrigation, and so the grapes themselves have more of a water content than they used to. We're not quite sure. But nobody dilutes the wine anymore, unless you're sick or something. But,
We have one
Meats and nothing, it's
Mhm.
something to that.
We only have, everybody has one liver. You mean kidney. You're talking about kidneys, but still then, they're allowed to drink alcohol. Yeah. That's something.
it's allowed.
Meat and everything we're going to get to is they're allowed. It's not really ideal because the mitzvah is to enjoy, and wine brings joy. The alcohol, you do what you need to do. So we don't dilute the wine, but it's like a historical thing. It's brought in the poskim, and that's why. But there's some people still do it today. Have you seen that? It's actually a Kabbalistic custom.
Ice or something? I don't know.
Not ice. No. A drop of water.
Oh.
Why? Usually when the wine is red represents justice, din, the harsher approach that God sometimes shows the world. Water represents chesed, which is the loving kindness. And with this Kabbalistic idea is you add a little drop of water to the wine, so that you're mixing the chesed and the din, that even if there has to be a strict justice brought to the world, it should be mixed with a measure of kindness, compassion. So this is a Kabbalistic custom. You don't have to do it. But it's mentioned, it sits on top of this ancient custom of diluting the wine. Then it was actually to make it drinkable and to make it more enjoyable. This is really based on Kabbalah, that, and it's a nice idea. If you're a Kabbalist, go for it, But otherwise, you don't have to. Yes.
Is it the same what we do sometimes on Friday evening?
That's right. Some people do it every Friday. Correct. Some people do it every week, but you don't have to. This is, as I said, it's a Kabbalistic custom. It represents an idea. It's a good thing to think about, but don't confuse that with diluting the wine, which is the original discussion here. In any case, instead, how do we? Instead, nowadays, Renan, go ahead.
Instead, nowadays they use the expression of our freedom by purchasing the finest wine that it is strong enough to intoxicate, because such wine causes a sense of joy, liberation, and freedom. However, one must be careful not to use wine so strong that it disrupts one's ability to concentrate on the Haggadah and fulfill the mitzvot on the Seder. One must therefore drink 4 cups of wine in a manner that brings joy and does not cause drunkenness or intoxication. If one fears that by drinking a full cup of regular wine he will be unable to concentrate properly while reading the Haggadah, he should mix the wine with grape juice. This will allow him to drink wine that intoxicates, while properly fulfilling all mitzvot of the Seder night. One who finds it difficult to drink wine that contains even just a small amount of alcohol may fulfill the mitzvah by drinking grape juice.
Okay, this is a sort of a compromised position. Some rabbis say you have to drink wine, no grape juice. Some rabbis say the only way, if you have trouble with alcohol, buy a different type of wine, which has less alcohol content. You can buy them. You can look them in the stores. You know, the standard is 13% for wine. You can find some wine which is 6%, and especially marked many times low alcohol content. If you know that you're going to get dizzy just from drinking 1 cup of wine, so that's the first solution. Then there's a special low alcohol content. You could actually find kosher wines that are like 2 or 3%, especially made for this purpose. Because ideally you should be drinking wine. Now, some rabbis say, "Well, I can't have any. What if I can't have any wine whatsoever?" So then the question is grape juice good enough? Some people say you have to force yourself to drink wine, even if you're going to get a headache and even if you're going to be sick, because that's the mitzvah. Some rabbis say, no, that doesn't make, that's not what a rich person would do. The point is to act like rich, to celebrate. That's not going to bring you celebration, it's going to make you sick. So you could just say, don't do anything because, you can't do the wine, so you drink water. Most rabbis say, no, there is this thing called grape juice. Grape juice is it comes from grapes. Fine, it's not intoxicating. It doesn't have alcohol in it. It wasn't fermented. But it's similar enough to wine to be called, to be used, and this has become quite popular. The approach which is most popular is that if you can't drink wine, at least you should drink grape juice. It's better than nothing. It's better than drinking water. But ideally, you should try to find wine. And if you can't find wine with low alcohol content, so dilute it, not with water, dilute it with grape juice. And if you have to dilute it with water, you can also, but as long as you have a little bit of wine in there, that's really the key point. For kids, of course, you're not allowed to give them wine. It makes them, it's not unhealthy. So, of course, kids grow up drinking grape juice. And then if people are old or can't handle the wine, then they also do the grape juice or some kind of a special low alcohol content wine. Yes, Yossi?
Where are we bringing it from that you need to be intoxicated or it needs to have alcohol in the wine?
Way back from the Talmud. The Talmud speaks about wine in particular, and this is one of the attributes of wine. As I said, wine was used in the Beit HaMikdash as well, and everybody knows what wine is. Wine is used in religious services from time immemorial.
Right, but you can get wine which is still considered complete wine. It's even got bitterness to it, but it's got absolutely zero alcohol.
Yeah, I don't know if any people would call that wine. People would call that grape juice.
Of course, someone who's accustomed to drinking like good wine.
No, I think part of the definition in halacha, the part of the definition of wine is that it fermented, it became. It turns into
grape juice and wine is only fermentation.
Yeah, right. It's the fermentation, so
Right.
that means alcohol.
Grape juice is a relatively new invention, though.
True,
the past
true.
Maybe 100 years.
Right.
Because if you take grapes and you crush them together and you put it through a strainer,
It's gonna ferment.
It will ferment.
Right.
Right,
So
but you see, it's you can still have them ferment, and you can still actually cook out the alcohol, because the alcohol has low boiling temperature than the rest of the
interesting.
liquid.
Interesting.
So it can be completely without any alcohol.
Interesting.
Still
Okay.
tastes
Yeah. So it's better. It's better than grape juice, but didn't know that this was a thing. You could have zero alcohol, wine. But
They put
if you
a
can,
drop of wine in there.
right, that's what you can do. That's what you should do if possible. But if necessary, I'm saying.
Instead of
Okay.
a drop of water.
Now, Moshe, you were intuiting the next idea that this whole idea of grape juice is a new thing. Take a look at the next paragraph. When the sages instituted, go ahead.
When the sages instituted the 4 cups, they did not imagine that one would fulfill this mitzvah with grape juice, as in their day there was no way to preserve the juice without it turning into vinegar. They wanted us to recite the Haggadah and tell the Exodus story, while drinking wine that enhances enjoyment. One who uses grape juice does not fulfill the mitzvah in the way the sages intended it. Even one who does not enjoy the taste of wine, or one who gets headaches from it, must drink the 4 cups. In fact, the Gemara recounts that Rav Yehuda ben Eli had to wrap his head in a handkerchief from Pesach until Shavuos due to a headache caused by drinking 4 cups of wine. However, if wine will cause one to be ill and lie down, he is exempt from this mitzvah. Now that grape juice is available, even one who merely suffers from the effects of wine, for example, it gives him headaches. He discharges his obligation using grape juice. Women are also commanded to drink 4 cups of wine, just as they are commanded to fulfill all the mitzvahs of the Seder night. Lechatchila, they too should drink wine that maximizes enjoyment. However, if a woman fears becoming intoxicated, she may use grape juice to dilute or even completely replace the wine if she prefers. The sages also stated that there is a mitzvah to seek out fine red wine. However, with diavad, any wine is adequate, even cheap white wine.
If you're interested in finding a good wine for the Seder, I refer you to my brother's article. He's a columnist. He writes about, usually politics and political, international relations type of things. But he also likes to write about wines. And his last article this Friday in the Jerusalem Post is how to have nice wines, a suggestion, a review of 6 or 7 different wineries and their Israeli wineries and their products to use on the Pesach Seder. And he goes through, you have 4 cups of wine, maybe choose a different type of wine for each cup. And then you have the 5th cup of Eliyahu, and he mentions this idea that some people want to say you should drink it nowadays. And he intermixes that little bit of a traditional story of the 4 cups of wine and how we practice it together with a review of the wines of the various wineries in the land of Israel. He sees it as a part of the redemption process, that we have beautiful, good wines, kosher wines being grown and bottled in the land of Israel. In any case, it is a mitzvah to have the best, finest wine for this mitzvah. What other mitzvah do we have that involves specifically drinking wine? So we have Kiddush Friday night. As a matter of fact, some people have the custom, which I think is a little bit off, but they enjoy fine wines, like usually it's dry red wines, but there's such a strong tradition that what is called Kiddush wine. You go to the supermarket, it says on it Kiddush wine. It's like sweet wine. Somehow that became set in people's minds that that's what you're supposed to use for Kiddush, and that's not true. That's not considered to be of a high quality. It's just what the kids like, maybe because it's sweet.
It's
people who
grape juice. I will not let anyone tell me anything else. It is pre-expired grape juice.
If you say so. But the point is, if you don't appreciate wines, you won't know the difference. People think that's what wine is, but people who have a higher appreciation of the art of making wine, by all means, use the best wine that you have for the mitzvah every week for the Kiddush. And, of course, on Leila Seder for the 4 cups of wine, it's a mitzvah to use the nicest, the finest wines. Like we said, we bring out your finest dishes and your finest clothing. And it's important to celebrate with good wine if you enjoy that. If you don't, obviously, you go with the grape juice. It's better than nothing, like we said. Okay, how much wine do you have to drink? That we're going to read about in number 8. Thomas, you're on.
Yeah. Amount of wine and cup size. In order to fulfill the mitzvah of the 4 cups or any other mitzvah that involves drinking wine, such as Kiddush, Havdalah, Birkat Hamazon, and wedding ceremonies, there must be a significant amount of wine in the cup. The sages determined that the cup must contain at least a quarter of a log. I repeat, of wine. Last, there is not a significant amount of wine and does not suffice to fulfill the obligation. A rebate is equal to in volume to an egg and a half, Menachem Meir calculated, based on writings of Rambam and other Rishonim, that this is 86 millimeters. However, more precise measurements show that it's 75
Approximately 75 millimeters, yeah.
millimeters. This amount, however, is not agreed upon by everyone. The exile gave rise to uncertainties regarding the size of olives and eggs, and some later Ashkenazi poskim ruled that today's eggs are only about half the size of eggs in the time of the sages. Therefore, I believe is closer to the volume of 3 of today's eggs.
About,
Approximately,
yeah.
150 milliliters. This stringent meters is known today as a Chazon Ish shiur.
Okay, once we're mentioning the Chazon Ish shiur, of course we have to mention why are we sitting here in this room right now. Really, if all other things were equal, we'd be on a bus going to the funeral of one of the students of the Chazon Ish.
Relative to you?
He was not a relative. He was a relative of Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, who was a student of the Chazon Ish, but Moshe, you wanted to say something?
I have a question about eggs.
1 minute, please. We'll get back to the eggs in a minute. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the rabbi who just died. You might have heard of this, but there's a rabbi, the greatest rabbi of our generation, according to many estimations, although it's hard to measure these things. His name was Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. He's the son of Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, who's known as the Stipler, genius, whose works are studied everywhere in every Beit Midrash around the world. His works were called Kilat Yaakov, because his name Yaakov Yisrael. So his son, who grew up in such a household, a close student of the Chazon Ish, which is mentioned before, it was Avram Yeshayahu Karelitz, who was the greatest of his day, and he founded the great rabbi in Bnei Brak. Founded Bnei Brak based around. It was all based around the Chazon Ish. So he was his student, and this Rav Chaim Kanievsky passed away on Friday afternoon at the age of 94, I believe. 94 years old, and he was uncontested one of the greatest minds of the generation. Knew all the Torah, all the Talmud Bavli and the Yerushalmi and the Midrashei Agadah and the Midrashei Halacha and the Zohar. He was like a walking encyclopedia. And more than that, he also wrote books, many books with his insights. He's a commentary on the Yerushalmi, commentary on many, even the smaller, sort of arcane portions of the Torah, like the smaller Masechtot. I think I mentioned to you once that besides the 63 Masechtot of Shas, which I taught you the other day, there's a group of smaller collections. They're called the Masechet, on Masechet Tzitzit, Masechet Tfilim, Masechet Gerim, all these which didn't make it into the Talmud Bavli, but they're collected a little bit later. Anyways, he wrote commentary on those, really even, and the sections of Torah which are not so well trodden, like the Seder's Ra'im, where there's no Talmud whatsoever, it's just Mishnah and Tosefta and the Tanaitic sources. So he wrote commentaries on the Derech Emunah, on the book of on the Seder's Ra'im, on the agricultural laws, and on Kodshim, on the also not the most practical yet in the laws of the sacrifices. He was quite, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to study Torah. The mitzvah to study Torah is discussed in a number of places. The first Lubavitcher Rebbe, before they moved to Lubavitch, is known as the Admor Zaken, the Alter Rebbe, the eldest Rebbe. The founder of the Hasidic movement that's known as Lubavitch. He wrote not only a famous book called the Tanya, but he also wrote a book. He's known as the Baal Tanya because of that book. He also wrote Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, it's known as Shulchan Aruch Harav. Shulchan Aruch of the Rav, meaning the Alter Rebbe. And it's like a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's like Penini Halacha, of course, predating them by 200 years. But 200 years ago, he wrote this book. And in that book, he has a special section about the laws of Talmud Torah. the laws of Talmud Torah are discussed in every halachic work, but he has a very long essay that goes into all the details of it. And there he makes it very clear, and nobody really disagrees with him, but it's very succinctly presented in this it's called Kuntras, this sort of essay at the back of the first volume of the Shulchan Aruch Harav. There he describes that one of the ideas of learning Torah, it's not just to learn. The mitzvah really is completed only when you know. The mitzvah is to know Torah, not just to learn Torah. In one ear, out the other. The mitzvah is to incorporate it, to understand, to actually remember it. And I think there's no greater example of someone who fulfilled the mitzvah of Yediat Torah, the knowledge of Torah, than Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Really was so knowledgeable that everything was at his fingertips. Of the vast array of Talmudic literature and beyond. So he just passed away at the age of 94, and it's really a big mitzvah to honor Torah scholars. So we should be on a bus to Bnei Brak. And the only reason we're not right now is because we still have time. Theoretically, we still have time to hop on a bus now, but I consulted with the powers that be here in Yeshiva, and apparently they left it up to the discretion for everybody to decide. They didn't close the yeshiva. Most yeshivas are closed today. Most yeshivas are fulfilling the mitzvah of honoring a Torah scholar. And I can justify their decision. It wasn't my decision, but it was their decision. The police are expecting upwards of 1 million people. The biggest funeral probably in Jewish history.
Really biggest than Nova Yusuf?
Probably bigger. That we don't know. But it's at the same scale of magnitude. So I was at Rav Ovadia Yosef's funeral. They say there were 800,000 people. They estimate them based on. Sorry.
I remember seeing on the news they were giving
Sure.
a helicopter view.
Yeah. No, you did you see me? I was waving. I also I was the man with the kippah glasses and beard. Yeah, that's it. And the truth is, I merited to be at the funeral of Moshe Feinstein, and the funeral of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Really, the greats of our generation. Fortunately, the previous generation now. But God never forsakes the Jewish people, and we have great rabbis which will take their place. But of course, they were unique and irreplaceable. In any case, it is a big mitzvah to honor the Torah. And that's why all the other yeshivas are closed. Maybe not all of them. Reason why I can justify not going personally and not taking you is because it's quite difficult to get there, and I'm not quite sure you'd be even hearing this description and this approach to try to understand the events like I'm able to teach you right here. Sometimes teaching by your feet is better, and I don't discount that. But there's another side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that, of course, all the funerals are going to be in Hebrew and Yiddish. Actually, probably they're going to be in Yiddish, and you won't wherever you get to, you won't be able to hear them because 1 million people can't fit in Bnei Brak. It's just impossible at the same time. And so basically what you have is you're going to have streets upon streets upon streets, kilometers and kilometers and kilometers of a sea of humans, which is, and you won't be able to hear what's going on or see what's going on. You won't get it anywhere close to the actual, the funeral itself or the cemetery itself. And if you wait, for hours and hours and hours and hours, maybe you can. And even getting there, you're not allowed to bring your car. It's only buses that are going. And the buses, they only go to a place which is about 3 kilometers away. So it's about an hour walk. If you're able to even walk there, which of course you won't be able to because there'll just be a sea of people, as I said. So masses. So I can understand the calculation. And of course, one more thing is that whenever you have 1 million people in a place which is too small to fit, it's very dangerous.
Oh, wow.
It's quite dangerous.
The recipe for disaster.
It's a recipe for disaster, yeah.
How we can deal with this? How we can
We have
give
to
our honor?
we have to take every. So we're speaking about him. We're speaking and we're studying Torah, of course, in his honor and for the sake of the merit of his neshama, and that's what we're doing as much as we can. It could be that they're going to have some screens put up here in one of the rooms, probably in the old Beit Midrash, where you can actually watch live the Hesped on the video feed, which will be broadcast around the world. So we can watch that from here. If you want to, of course, you are definitely allowed. You can go try to find a bus that's going to that area, and do what I expressed to you. That basically, you'll be, if you get a bus, and they don't stop the bus because they're saying they're only allowing 1,000 buses or so, and probably be more than 1,000 buses. Right, so that's only 50 people a bus. So how many people is that? 1,000 buses? 50,000 people? There's going to be easily upward of 500,000 people. So they're not going to allow all the buses in. And so you won't even get to within an hour's walk of the funeral. You'll have to, even if you do get a bus, it'll be even further away. And it's quite an experience. And it really, if all things were equal, I would say that we should go. But I think this gives us the opportunity to study in his merits, and to maybe we'll be able to watch some of it, and maybe there'll be translation, simultaneous translation. It should be happening around 12 o'clock today. So we'll see. Maybe our later class will get canceled, and we'll go at least participate in that way by listening and maybe translating some of the eulogies. But anyways, the powers that be said we have classes, and for those who want to go are allowed to go, but those who don't, we're going to have our classes, so we can study Torah in his merit. Yes.
In situations like this, we can ask, what would Rav Chaim want us to do?
So it's complicated, I'll tell you, because the actual sources deal with this, and they say when a great Talmud Torah scholar dies, we close everything. We close the stores. You're not allowed to have businesses run, and we close the schools, and all the kids are supposed to leave the schools and go. So the on the playbook, this situation says you don't have classes and you go. Practically, to implement that is very difficult nowadays because of everybody's holding their breath and praying, not for the neshama of Rav Kanievsky, we're praying that nobody gets hurt. Because, crowd control, we're within less than a year of a horrible, horrible tragedy in Meron. You guys know what I'm talking about, where people were trampled to death. Was it 36 people, I think, they were killed or something like that? And, crowd control is very difficult. Obviously, the police and the people, the powers that be, made the wrong call then, and, we hope they've learned their lesson. But it's a dangerous situation, so, you got to be careful.
Oh, I got a question.
The Jerusalem Post is mentioning that officials warn of Meron too as crowds arrive for Rabbi Kanievsky's funeral.
As I'm saying, this is on everybody's mind, and the organizers themselves. But in the end of the day, people are people. There's all sorts of mechanisms. It's a well-known phenomenon. Nobody wants anybody to get hurt, but we have rock concerts where people get hurt, and then we have big gatherings. It just there's what's called the stampede, the herd effect. When you get lots of people and they start to crowd, and then you get swept away, and there's really not much you can do. So the rabbis have said, don't bring small children, who are the first ones to suffer. And I can see the concern leading the members of this yeshiva, and in particular, we're talking about, we are beginners here who are not going to understand the funeral in any case, and it's a foreign country. I can see the logic in not actually closing the yeshiva like most yeshivot. Another question. Somebody had, yes, Thomas, yeah.
As I asked it to people, Rav Kanievsky was decided always as the biggest Gadol Hador of this generation. And now he's the
Remains to be seen. So I will say one other thing, because it's to help. Part of my job here is to teach you Torah. Part of it is to help you, guide you through to understand the Jewish world and the ins and outs. So there is a phenomenon. So there's a phenomenon of in the Hasidic world that the Rabbi was not always the greatest Torah scholar. The Rabbi was someone who was the leader of the community, and somebody who had special magical powers of giving blessings. The Rabbi was a very holy person, and some over the last 100 years, more so over the last 50 years, more so over the last 20 years even, those dividing lines have been broken down. And even the Lithuanian world, which is not Hasidic in any way, the greatest rabbi, for example, Rav Kanievsky, became somebody that you would go to not only with your questions about halacha and the Talmud, but you came to be someone that you go to for a blessing. This is something that was in the Hasidic world. You go to the Rebbe for a blessing, but to the Rosh Yeshiva, to the Talmud scholar, you go to ask your questions. But he has turned into also a type of a Rebbe that gives blessings. And of course, he didn't want any of this, but people wanted it. People need the blessings. People need to have that leader that they can turn to and feel that he has some kind of spiritual powers more so than they do. And so I could say maybe even more so in his old age, it's called the handlers, the people who take care of him and who run his court. The cynics say they're making a lot of money off of his back. And they know that people pay lots of money to get his blessings. And so they started to charge money for his blessings. And, this tzedakah fund will say, if you give tzedakah to us, you'll get the blessings of Kanievsky. And it's really turned into an industry. So there's the dark side of this whole societal creation. Who is the Gadol Hador? The Gadol Hador, it's hard to define. When you're talking about Torah scholarship, fine, you could argue, you could look at the books and analyze their writings and see their insightfulness and their scholarship, etc. But when it comes to the social definition, who is the leader? So there's two parts. One is the blessings, commercial blessings issue, which is, we try not to pay attention to that and give it too much credence. But then there's the political aspect. The third aspect is the political aspect. Political aspect is that there's a segment of the Israeli population called the Haredi world, which has political parties, which, the leadership, of course there's politicians, but they all say, well, we're just going to give in to what the rabbis say. We're not deciding anything. It's a little bit of a red herring, because of course the politicians make a lot of the decisions themselves. But officially, the line is, we follow the rabbi's words. And which rabbi? So every political party has their rabbi. So there's sometimes one rabbi that is so great that all of the political parties say, we're going to follow this rabbi. Rav Kanievsky became that in the last years. Of course, there was other rabbis. They died, and then Rav Steinman was alive until about 5 years ago, and he was, Rav Kanievsky had no interest in it. He didn't know anything about politics. He didn't want to know anything about politics. Some people say he didn't even know how a computer worked. He was a scholar, pure and simple, and very much in the ivory tower, and that's it became idealized in the Haredi world as a form of society, building a society which is around Torah study and Torah only. So he was the icon. And so there's a political element as well. And there's a lot of anger at his handlers, for example, his grandson. Kanievsky is responsible for some of the terse decisions made by Rav Kanievsky, the 94-year-old man. Does he know about epidemiology when it came to the recent coronavirus? He was almost a lone wolf when they asked him, should we close the yeshivas? And he said, no, you don't close the yeshivas. Not necessarily understanding the implications of what that can mean in a pandemic and the dynamics of how it works. Whatever it is, Rav Kanievsky, if you leave out the politics and you leave out the blessings, some people care more about the politics and the blessings than the Torah. But I am teaching you primarily about the Torah. Torah-wise, of course, he was gadol, beyond description, really, how great he was in terms of his Torah knowledge, fulfilling this mitzvah to know all of Torah. And we have to show him tremendous respect because of that. But like everything, there's all these other aspects which complicate matters. And maybe that's influencing the yeshivas here's decision about whether you go or not. I don't know. I'm not going to weigh in on that. Yeah.
I have a blessing from a very great Rabbi that says the great rabbi's funeral at 12-ish we will assemble in the old base medrash to view and hear the funeral. I will translate it into English. It's from Rav Listman on the group chat.
Okay, so there's going to be a feed here at 12 o'clock, and Rav Listman will translate for you. And it's one form, one way of participating. Of course, we have to participate in Am Yisrael, even if they were going to see the ball game. Amazing thing to have 1 million Jews gathered in one place, even if it's not 1 million, doesn't matter the specific number. Probably for sure it'll be 600,000. That's a very significant number in halacha. Even you have a gathering of 600,000, which is, of course, the classic number of the Jews coming out of Egypt. So we're going to come back to the rules of the wine and the special opinion of we're talking about. I was about to draw for you how big the cup has to be, and the Chazon Ish, the teacher of Rav Kanievsky, he had a unique opinion, which is discussed whenever we talk about the shirim, the measurements which we have to use, which we're going to discuss throughout our discussions of the Seder night. How much do you have to have? How much wine? How much matzah? How much maror? Etc. Etc. We're going to be referring back to the Chazon Ish's opinion. Last questions for today.
My egg question from earlier.
We'll come back to it tomorrow. It's a good question, and we're going to discuss it. Believe it or not, I can show you entire books, which were written on the subject of the eggs, the size of the egg. So we'll discuss it more tomorrow. Yes?
Right, go back to Rabbi Kanievsky.
Yeah.
I was told an interesting thing, which is like we have the Day of Memorial of the Holocaust. But say when I was in school, and if it came up during a Kodesh lesson, then you mustn't give a moment of silence because it's not in their honor to stop learning Torah. How does that apply when, in this case, when a great Rav passes away?
That is the difference between an actual funeral, which is happening in live time. The rules are very clear. You close the books and you go to the funeral of the great rabbi. And this moment of silence idea, this yearly commemoration, is that's a secular innovation that you have such a day. And how to relate to it, I'm not sure I would agree with what your school did. But that's another question. That's not a live funeral. That's just a day which was decided by somebody. Now we're going to commemorate. Okay, there's when we get to that, and we're going to get to that in about 2 months' time, when there's actually going to be or less than that, the Holocaust Memorial Day. We were going to speak about what we should do as Torah Jews. How do we relate to this Holocaust Memorial Day? But that's not the same thing as going to a funeral in real time. Okay. We'll stop here and we'll continue with Hashem tomorrow. I know how to stop it. I don't know how to push.